here. All right, and welcome to those of you joining us from YouTube. On the TCF side of things, I want to thank Itasca Bank for sponsoring our webinar. Sponsors like Itasca Bank help us to keep these webinars free for everybody. If you have a business or you know of business that would be interested in sponsoring some webinars, contact me for more information. You can also help us to keep these webinars free. At the end of the webinar, you're going to be taken to a page with a whole bunch of resources of things you might be interested in, like our native plant guide, rain barrel information, and so much more, including our virtual tip jar. So if you're enjoying these webinars, I do encourage you to donate to help TCF continue to do all the really awesome stuff that we do. And I'll tell you a little bit more about some of that stuff in just a minute, because we do a lot more than just webinars. So you can also check the box to become a member and then enjoy our wide variety of members only stuff. So lots of fun and exciting things here. Hey, next week, I will not be here. It will be Jan, but we will be joined by beekeeper Frank Moriarty of Honey with Style to talk about beekeeping. So I'm really excited to get Frank in. I've been wanting to do one on beekeeping for a while. They're not native bees, but beekeepers and beekeeping is to me very, very fascinating. So, and then on July 21st, living architecture, green roofs, living walls, and more. That one's going to be really cool too. So really, really looking forward to that one as well. All righty then. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you here. And there we go. All right. And so here we go. Let the sun shine. So today we're going to be talking about plants that like lots and lots of sun. So first off, a little bit about the Conservation Foundation. When we have guest speakers, we can't always get into all of this, but so I just thought I would take a minute here to talk a little bit about the Conservation Foundation, which is where I work, and who we are and what we do. So we are a 501c3. That means we're a nonprofit in operation since 1972. And that right there is our mission statement. So we're looking to improve the health of our communities. We're not just preserving open space because we think it's a cool thing to do. It is, but it also helps the health of our communities, not just our natural communities, but also our human communities as well. So protecting open space, rivers, watersheds, all of that helps our family and friends in the animal kingdom, but it also helps our own family and friends as well. And we're also an accredited land trust, which is really important. There is an accrediting body for all land trusts. No matter where you're at, there is probably a land trust near you. So you can check out findalandtrust.org is the website to find out who your nearest land trust is. We serve Kane, Kendall, DuPage, and Will counties in Illinois. As you can see from this map here, sometimes we branch out to other counties like LaSalle and DeKalb, occasionally down into Grundy. So we basically go wherever we're needed. And each of those little dots there is a piece of land that we have helped to protect. Doesn't mean we own that piece of land, but we have been involved in helping to protect it. So that's 43 conservation easements, so large pieces of land in private ownership that people want to be protected forever, such as our farm in Naperville. Our farm is a conservation easement. The previous owner, Lenore McDonald, wanted her farm protected to make sure that it was never going to get built on and taken over. So she put a conservation easement on that property and then donated it to us on her passing. So that's our headquarters. And that land is now protected forever. It can never be built on. So it's kind of cool. All right. And it's important because having open space along rivers and streams protects our water quality, protects our air quality, wildlife habitat, and it's really important that kids have space to get outdoors. My son is super into fishing right now, and protecting these watersheds means he can have places where he can go and fish, grab his fishing pole, jump on his bike, and go catch some fish. So it's our responsibility to future generations to make sure that they've got these same opportunities. All right, so now moving on to plants. Let's talk some plants here. So challenges of sun. In sunny areas, it can get really, really hot, which means the soil can also get really, really dry there. One of the benefits though, when you have lots of plants like this, I've seen graphs and it shows how having plant cover like this actually helps to keep the soil cool. So it's really interesting when you have just grass or bare ground, that solar energy can come down and really heat up that ground. But when you have plants on there, that helps to keep it cool as well. It shades the ground and actually helps to keep the earth's surface cooler. So having plants is a benefit in that way too. And they, soak up that solar energy in there as well. Other challenges, sometimes things can really just go kind of nuts in there and start taking over if they're really happy. So it's kind of important to make sure you've got a good mix of plants and have the right plants in there, and not be afraid to take something out. If you try something and it just starts taking over a space, like my Monarda is doing right now, not be of the mindset that, well, it's native there, so it's got to stay no matter what. It's your yard. Be happy with it. And if something is making you unhappy with it, take it out. Try something else. This is an ongoing experiment. I don't know a single gardener who puts their plants in the ground and that's the end. It's never the end of the story. Because plant communities are going to grow and change, and some things are going to go away and some things are going to try and take over. It's just kind of an ongoing evolution of your garden. So don't be afraid to take something out if it's not making you happy, or if it's doing things you don't like it to do, or it's crowding out other things. It's okay. I give you permission. I don't know why I have to give you permission, but there are some people I know that I've said that and they're like, oh, thank you. I feel so much better now. So there you go. I give you permission to take out things that aren't making you happy. All right. So things that you have to think about is, are you in full sun, morning sun, part sun? Is it wet, dry, or mesic? Mesic is a term that you're going to see sometimes, like if you go onto websites for plant nurseries, you're going to see it'll say like wet to mesic soils. Mesic is that sort of Goldilocks right in the middle, not too wet, not too dry. It's that middle value. So when you're looking at plants, you need to kind of understand, is this area that you're planting in going to be super dry? If you go a couple of days without rain, you start to see cracks in the soil maybe. Or you go a couple of days without rain and it's still spongy. All different ways. And I think there's another way to test too that involves drying out the soil. You can look up your local extension for more information if you want to get super, super technical on that. But also understanding your soil types is another thing. Where I am at here in Will County, I have very heavy clay soils. I was digging out to put in some plants near my house, and like literally up near my foundation. And I was pulling out huge chunks of clay. I mean, I could have built an entire new set of pottery out of all the clay that I was pulling out of this. So heavy, heavy clay. Knowing that, I know to be looking for plants that can tolerate heavy clay. So, and if you have trees nearby, understand that 3, 4, 5 years from now, that area may look very different. I have a berm that I had in my head was just full sun. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to tackle this area. I'm going to get all the weeds out. I'm going to put lots of new little plants in there. Bought a whole flat from Prairie Moon Nursery, one of their kits, because they sell kits. It's kind of cool. Variety of different sun-loving plants in there. So I get it, and I'm down and I'm putting all my plants in and I'm happy. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, it's awfully shady here for my full sun berm. And then I realized the trees next to it had grown up, and now my full sun berm is now actually part shade. So we'll see what happens to my full sun plants. Anyway, one of my, and I didn't take my own advice. My advice for this is, if you're going to plant in a new area, even if you think you know what the sun is going to be like there, take a day and check it once an hour. Just keep a little log, sun or shade. Once an hour, go out, look at your spot. Is it sunny? Is it shady? Keep that log. And then at the end of the day, you'll have a really good picture of what the sun conditions for that area are. Like I said, I just had in my head, my berm is full sun, and it really wasn't. All right, so why are native plants so important? Well, first off, they're gonna save you time and money in the long run. You don't have to spend as much time watering and fertilizing and babying these native plants because they're at home, right? They're where they wanna be. They are where they're used to being. And they're okay with our hot, dry summers, our cool, wet springs, crazy winters that get sub-zero or, under 18 inches of snow. They're okay with all of this. So wherever you are, look up the native plants for your area because they may be different from mine. If you're outside of the Chicago region, your native plants may be a little bit different from mine. There could be some that overlap, but make sure you find out what's native to your area because that's what's going to do well in the long run. So once they start to fill in, they're going to outcompete the weeds. They're going to take care of themselves during droughts. You're not going to have to worry about watering constantly. And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what the roots look like, but they just take care of themselves. So then we put in these pretty native flowers, and boy, don't those look nice. Okay, well, when we plant those, now we have the caterpillars, right? And the caterpillars become the butterflies and things. We're trying to feed them. That's part of the point. So if you're starting to see a couple of little holes here and there in your leaves, don't panic. It's okay. That's what you're trying to do, right? You want things to be eating your plants. We are feeding the ecosystem. Native insects will not do more than, they say, about 20% damage to any plant. And the point at which people feel like they need to start treating them is closer to like 50%. So while they may do tiny bits of aesthetic damage here and there, in the long run, it won't hurt the plant. The plant will be fine. And then we're feeding these pollinators that we're trying to work so hard to bring back. So we feed the caterpillars with our native plants, and then we bring in the birds because the birds eat the caterpillars. They need those little caterpillars to feed their babies. They have to find, for some reason, the number 200, about 200 a day is in my head for these little chickadees. I could be wrong on that, don't quote me. Read Doug Tallamy. He goes into so much more detail on this than I can. But those caterpillars are stuffed with nutrients that those little baby birds need in order to have the bright colored plumage that they're going to need to eventually attract a mate, as well as all the protein and vitamins and minerals. They are little nutrient packages that the baby birds need. So by bringing in native plants, we bring in the insects that the birds need. And then, yeah, of course, we're going to get the other end of the food chain too. So you're going to end up with other birds like maybe this Cooper's hawk, who are going to eat the birds as well. But circle of life, everybody's got to eat. But this is a complete food chain. Now you have turned your yard into a part of nature instead of being apart from nature. So, and it all starts with these native plants. So take a look at this diagram here. This shows the root systems of, on the left, some non-native common landscaping plants. On the right, some similar native plants. So Kentucky bluegrass that you see there, those roots are only 2 to 3 inches deep. Do you know where Kentucky bluegrass is actually native to? I will give you a hint. It is not Kentucky. It is actually the Middle East. That root system is made for clinging to sandy soils, right? If you're in sandy soils, it doesn't matter how far down you go, there's nothing there. You instead need that thick net-like root system to hold yourself in place. That's not what we have here. That's not our soils. So that's why we spend all summer trying to baby that grass, trying to make it feel like it's in the Middle East. Whereas if we planted buffalo grass, which is native here, and I challenge any of you to hold them side by side and tell them apart. I can't even do it most of the time. Buffalo grass looks just like a regular lawn, but it never grows over, I forget what it is, like 8 inches or something like that. If you had a lawn full of buffalo grass, you could get away with mowing it twice a year. Twice a year mowing your grass instead of every week in the summer like we do here in the Chicago region. So why don't we plant buffalo grass? There's probably a number of reasons. It's not as easy to grow. It is a warm season grass, which means it doesn't green up as quickly in the spring. However, it stays green all summer throughout the drought with zero watering, zero fertilizing, no input to the system at all. It takes care of itself. Prairie dropseed is an ornamental type grass, similar to something like a fountain grass, but it's native and it's absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite landscaping grasses. Just, I love the way it sort of grows up and fountains over. It's really, really nice. Black-eyed Susan's a plant that most of you should be probably familiar with. That's that disc flower that's got the really dark center and the yellow petals. Again, look at that root system compared to daylilies, right? Just lots of great options here, and they handle our weather conditions so much better. So anyway, so that's just to give you an idea of what we're looking at here when we're talking about native plants and why they're so much better. All right, so sample designs, let's take a look. Just randomly sampled a couple of designs here. I always say there are as many different design styles as there are people. I am not an artist. I am not a designer in the slightest. I just happen to know my plants. So that's why landscape architects, landscape designers are so valuable, because if you really want that more artistic look, they can help you with things, especially things like the hardscapes. On the right there, I really like how they have the retaining walls. When you have a sloped area like that, that can be really hard to plant because the water sort of runs off it. So you end up with drier at the top and wetter at the bottom. If you put in a sort of stepped area like that, that helps to hold the rainwater in place and water those plants, get the water down into the water table. And it makes things a little more even as far as the rainwater goes. And it, can keep things from eroding and all of that as well. So just having that little step down system there is really nice. But then our friends at Barrington Area Conservation Trust put together this little monarch way station plan here, shows a clumping design. So a lot of times when you talk with designers, they'll talk about planting first of all in odd numbers. So 3s, 5s, things like that. For some reason, our eyes just like odd numbers. So you will almost never see them recommend like a grouping of 4. I don't know, it's a thing. But when nature tends to plant things in clusters instead of being evenly dispersed. So you can see your clusters in that chart there on the left, your clusters of your yellow black-eyed Susans or your purple liatris, right? Lots of different plants in that garden there, but all butterfly loving plants or plants that butterflies love. I don't know, I guess they love the butterflies too. But Monarch Way Station is one certification program that you can go to. We at the Conservation also have our Conservation at Home program that I'll talk about at the end. But you can kind of get a sense here, just a couple of different ways to do it. There on the right, things are a little more spread out. If you're doing it that way, you're going to want mulch in there. Over time, I would fully expect many of those plants to sort of start to fill in. Usually by year 3, 4, 5, those plants, they're reproducing, they're spreading, and they're starting to take up that space, which is good because that means that's going to keep the weeds out. When you have a more sparse area like that, you're more likely to get weeds in there, just birds randomly coming by, dropping seeds in there. That's just kind of how it goes. But as time goes on, they tend to fill in, like you see there on the left, and that's going to keep out weeds. That's going to be a much easier spot to take care of because you've got all this stuff coming up. The weeds just simply have no place to go. All right, so let's start talking about sunny and wet conditions here. So I would say it probably doesn't get too much more wet than this here. So our first plant that I want to highlight is Joe Pyweed. Joe Pyweed is fantastic. It is a butterfly magnet. And I'm not the only one that calls it that. The Joe Pyweed that I have in my yard, the butterflies are on it constantly, as well as the little native bees and everybody else. It is tall, right? It's on the taller side. It gets 4 to 6 feet tall, depends on how happy it is. And also, it also depends on which one you get to. I think there's a couple of different varieties out there. It definitely likes wetter soils and partial shade. So maybe doesn't want to be in full sun, but if it's an area where it gets like mostly sun and a little bit of shade, it's going to be really, really happy. I think it can also handle full sun. The thing about a lot of these plants is many of these are recommendations. I find that even if something says, oh, it's got to have full sun all the time, and you put it in, sometimes, even if there's like a little bit of shade there, even sometimes if it gets like half shade, it'll still do okay. Doesn't mean it's not going to grow there. It's going to die as soon as it, touches the shade. And sometimes there are things like, oh no, it likes wetter areas, and you put it in some place that's dry and something about that spot it likes and it does fine. On the other hand, there are some things like cardinal flower, for some reason, you can put it in what should be the perfect habitat for it, and it does great the first year and you never see it again. Why? I don't know. Other people put it in, they're like, oh, the conditions are kind of right, and it explodes. Why does it happen? Soil ghosts. I don't know. Soil ghosts is a joke that I sort of made up that just is one of those things that we can't explain why it's doing well there or not doing well there. There's something about it that's making it unhappy. Maybe it's the soil type. Maybe it's the pH of the soil. Maybe it's the bacterial communities that are in the soil or fungal communities that are in the soil. Who knows? I just wrap it all up and call it soil ghosts. I don't know. So anyway, back to Joe Pyweed. Fantastic, fantastic plant. They do tend to spread and form these clusters. Well behaved, not super, super aggressive. I haven't found, again, maybe if it's totally happy, it's a bigger spreader, but I find it just sort of fills in these little clumps and makes a really nice look up against a fence because it gets taller. I like to keep tall things like in the back, up against a fence, up against a house, or some area that can handle their large size. All right. Blazing Star, another butterfly magnet. So this is a summer bloomer. Mine are just on the cusp of blooming. I think maybe give them another week or so. But anything in this Liatris family are absolutely gorgeous, right? Pair them up with some grasses. The grasses give them a little bit of structure, help to keep those really tall, top-heavy flower spikes upright. Getting them, again, in with something else that can handle the height is good too. Help keep them upright, keep them from flopping over. Oh, another tip that I learned for some of the taller things, they make these, it's almost like a round metal grid with stakes in it. If you can get that in the ground where your plants are before they start growing, the plants will grow up through that grid, and it helps to keep them upright, keeps them from flopping over, gives them a little more support in there. So anything that's on the taller side that you worry about flopping over and looking kind of bad, something like golden Alexanders or things like that, it can help keep them a little more contained, keep them a little more upright from just sprawling out all over the place. So little gardening tip for me. I just bought some off of Amazon and I'm very excited to use them. But Blazing Star, lots of different kinds. Obviously, I picked Marsh Blazing Star for this one since we're talking about wet areas, but beautiful, beautiful purple flowers that the butterflies and the insects love. Blazing Star is another one that there's lots of different types out there depending on your conditions. There is probably a Blazing Star that is right for you. All right, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about milkweeds. So since we are talking about things that like on the wetter side, swamp milkweed is a great milkweed for home landscaping. It doesn't get too tall. I say this one gets about waist high. So when we're talking about milkweeds, you got common milkweed. Common milkweed gets like 6 feet tall. It's a big boy, right? And not always great for home landscaping because it can be a little bit weedy. It spreads a ton. So you don't want it in an area that you're trying to keep things under control. It goes a little crazy. But again, up against a fence, someplace where you can kind of keep it contained, keep it upright, is okay. But swamp milkweed, that one grows to be about waist high. Pretty purple flowers on it. Makes that really nice kind of shrubby appearance there when it fills in, and the butterflies love it. It is one of the host plants for monarch butterflies, as are anything in the Asclepias family. It's what they lay their eggs on. It's what they need to lay their eggs on. So no milkweeds, no monarchs. So having swamp milkweed is great to help bring monarch butterflies to your yard. Obedient plant. Obedient plant's a fun little plant. I love this little guy. You'll find different shades of it. Again, be a little bit careful if you're trying to go all native in your garden with cultivars. So you might hear them sometimes referred to as nativars. And what that means is some plant company has somehow bred this plant to have different characteristics from the original, or what we call the wild type. And sometimes the difference is color, sometimes the bloom time is affected, sometimes it's the shape of the flower, like you'll get a double flower or something like that. Lots of different things that they can change that they hope will make it more appealing to the homeowner, plus it's something that they can patent, right? You can't patent the wild type. So they change it, make this cultivar, and you can tell they're cultivars because there'll be some kind of cutesy name at the end. So for example, one that just pops into my head is butterfly weed, like butterfly milkweed, and then in parentheses, it'll say ice ballet, or prairie fire, or whatever. That name in the quotes, that tells you it's a cultivar. The problem with cultivars is when we change too much about the flower, it makes it so the insects, the pollinators that we're trying to help with these, don't always recognize them. Sometimes these flowers have colors in them that we can't see. There's one that blooms really early in the spring, and Spring Beauty, it's called. And it's this little tiny, looks like a little tiny pink flower to us. But if you look at it on the, bring down the ultraviolet spectrum, or I don't know how all that stuff works, but what the insects actually see is it's got like neon signs pointing right to the center to say, hey, insects, come pollinate right here. We can't see them, but they're there and the insects can see them. So when you change these, sometimes that stuff gets removed and now the insects basically can't see the flower. Other times, if you change the flower too much, the insect's mouth parts are specially designed, specially shaped to fit inside that flower. If you change that flower too much, the insect mouth parts don't fit anymore. Sort of like a key in a lock. The key fits right into the lock, unlocks it. But if you change that lock too much, now the key doesn't fit anymore. That's kind of what happens when we start messing around with these flowers. So be very careful getting cultivars if you're trying to have an all native garden. And again, with bloom times, the insects are, how they know, I don't know, but it's like they know what to look for at different times of the year. And if it's not blooming at the right time, the insects are going to miss it. It's going to be off of their, say, reproductive cycle or whatever it is that they're doing. So watch, wild types are highly preferred if you're going for an all native garden. So obedient plant, where does it get its name from? Well, it's kind of fun, and I love doing this with kids. So you can kind of take the flowers, you see how there's all those little individual flowers along the spike, and you can move them around the spike, and they will actually stay where you put them. So you see they're all kind of perfectly lined up there, but you can actually move them around the spike and rearrange them and whatever. It's kind of cute. That's where the name comes from. But it can be in different shades of pale purple to a little bit darker purple, almost white sometimes. But very nice, likes mesic, remember that middle ground to wet soils, and is a fall bloomer. So remember, fall bloomers are really important. There's not a whole lot that blooms in the fall, but we have insects like monarch butterflies that are trying to fuel up, get that last bit of energy in them to make their migration down to Mexico. So having things that bloom in the fall are really important. again, because we're trying to get our garden to go have something blooming all year long, and we don't have a lot of choices in the fall. So this is one of our great fall choices. Calm St. John's wort, Hypericum. So interestingly enough, I found, I was reading up about this yesterday, and I found the name Hypericum. It comes from the Greek hyper, meaning above, and icon, meaning picture. And it relates to the tradition of taking clusters of these flowers and hanging them over pictures in people's houses. So I don't know, like religious icons or photos of deceased family members, whatever it was, sort of, I don't want to say an offering, but, you know, kind of placing flowers around pictures. So there you go. That's where the name Hypericum comes from. St. John's wort has long been used in traditional medicines, but it also makes a really nice little shrub, right? It prefers sun or part shade, blooms July and August, and it likes moist, sandier soils. There are a few different kinds of St. John's wort. Some are native, but some are not. Avoid Hypericum perforatum, also known as common St. John's wort. It is not native and it is invasive. So this is one that's kind of taken over. So you don't want the common St. John's wort, but there are a few others. Calm St. John's wort, and there's another one called shrubby St. John's wort that I think it likes drier soils. But one of the ways you can tell St. John's wort, though, is look at all the stamen in there. All of those, the male parts of the flower that are sticking out there. One of the key identifying features of a St. John's wort flower is just tons and tons of stamen. So, but pretty flower, makes a very nice arrangement there. And it's got kind of some interesting fall and winter interest too. You can see those seed capsules, what they look like. So yeah, that's St. John's wort. So something you might consider, if you have an area of your yard that is super, super wet all the time, you might consider a rain garden. So a rain garden is an area where you intentionally direct water on your property and then plant it full of native plants that are going to absorb that water and have lots of deep roots that'll help direct some of the water down. They'll absorb some of it and they'll take care of that rain. And it's a way of helping to keep the rain where it falls on your property. In my rain garden, I actually have one of the gutters from my house, just like it shows in this image here. I have my rain gutter coming down. It's directed down into a dry stream bed. That dry stream bed gives the water a place to go, kind of tells it where it's going, and it goes down into a little basin where I have it planted full of water-loving plants. And the nice thing about rain gardens is they're not wet all the time. The goal is not to have a pond. If you want a pond, that's something different. But a rain garden is not intended to be wet all the time. It's intended to take a large volume of water and deal with it. Soak it up, put it down into the ground, whatever's going to happen. But rain gardens are really great ways to deal with wet areas of your property. I've done another webinar just entirely on rain gardens and rain barrels. Check that one out on YouTube. It's recorded, it's on YouTube. But if you're interested in rain gardens, definitely check that out. All right, so now let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about sunny and dry areas. I mentioned before, I've got wild bergamot. Monarda is another name for it. Monarda is a really nice, somewhat aggressive plant that you can have in your dry, sunny native garden. It's another one that's really loved by not just butterflies, but also hummingbirds as well. It's got those nice tube-shaped flowers that hummingbirds really like. So Monarda is great. It's in the mint family. So if you roll that stem between your fingers, you can feel that square stem that it has, telling you that it's part of the mint family. This is one that you will find lots and lots of cultivars are. I have seen red ones. I have seen bright purple ones, pale purple ones, pink ones, all different colors. Again, wild type is always preferred. But this is another thing I want to mention with Monarda. As I said, it can be kind of aggressive, which means if you get it into an area where it's happy, it's going to reseed and sort of try and take over. Now, we don't ever call native plants invasive. The description I heard one time was you can't invade your own home, right? They're from here. This is where they're from. They can't invade their own home, but they can be aggressive. So our non-native plants, they are invasive. Our native plants can be aggressive, but we don't call them invasive. It may seem a little pedantic to say that, but it really is important terminology because they do belong here. So they're not invasive. They're just growing a little more aggressively than we would like them to. Ohio spiderwort. So Tradescantia is a really, really nice plant. Those long, thin grass-like leaves are really, really pretty with those bright blue, purpley blue kinds of flowers. Super pretty. They bloom in, I would say, late spring. They're just about done blooming now. So they're kind of one of those late spring, early summer bloomers, but super, super pretty plants. Almost look like iris in my mind, like a miniature iris almost, with those long skinny leaves and then the bright purpley blue flowers. But really nice one to have, can really add some structure into your garden because they can get, 2 to 4 feet tall depending on how happy they are, but a really, really nice one to have. Coneflowers. So purple coneflowers are one of those, anymore they're super common, right? Even people who know nothing about native plants, they are familiar with coneflowers. So this is one of those things, if you're in an area where you're kind of dealing with people who are maybe not as native plant friendly as we'd like them to be, this is one of those things that we can put in there that they'll see and go, oh, okay, I know this is a landscaping flower. This isn't a weed. And it's one of those things that kind of can help bring acceptance to your native garden. So there's a couple different ones. The pale purple coneflower is native, as well as the purple coneflower. I have to go back and look it up, but I think the pale purple one is the more preferred, more local. I have to go back and look it up, but they really look great in amongst all the other natives in there. They're that really striking purple with that orangey center to them. Just really a great plant. Butterflies, native bees, everybody likes pale purple coneflowers. And butterfly weed. So we had swamp milkweed as our wet species. Butterfly weed is our drier to mesic soil species. Now, depending on how happy they are, they can grow 2 to 3 feet. So I always say these are about knee high, right? So our swamp milkweed grows to waist high. Our butterfly weed grows to about knee high. Those orange flowers are easily one of the most striking things you will have in your garden. I don't know what it is about them, but every native garden I've looked at, everything else is beautiful, but that butterfly weed just always really stands out. My experience, this is not, if you put a buffet of Asclepias in front of a monarch butterfly, this is not the one they're going to go to first. But any port in a storm. So if this is all you can put in your yard for monarchs, it's fine, right? It's still, the flowers are great. The lots of different insects like the flowers and will pollinate the flowers. So it's a great choice for a home landscape bed, especially if you're in an area where you got to keep things kind of low to make friends with the neighbors. It's totally fine. Asters. So we mentioned already that having things that bloom in the fall is really important. And asters are another one. There are, I don't know, I'm totally making this number up, but like 100 different species of asters that are all native here. And they come in lots of different shades, different colors, different sun and moisture requirements. You can probably find an aster that will fit your needs. There's an aromatic aster, there's New England aster, there's sky blue asters. They all bloom, mostly, all the ones I can think of anyway, bloom in the fall and add that little bit of color like right before winter's going to hit. So these are the ones that are going to sort of wrap up your yard for the year. So these are going to be your last bloomers. And again, really important for our pollinators like the monarchs who go away for the winter, who are going someplace and needing to fill up as they are leaving. So asters are great. One slight word of warning, some of them can get a little bit tall and can look a little bit weedy before they bloom. So like now. So just make sure you've got other things in your garden that's sort of gonna, I don't want to say hide it, but that will draw the attention to them until these guys bloom. When they bloom, they are spectacular. When they're not blooming, they can be a little gangly. So that's my note on asters. But yeah, fantastic for fall color. Coreopsis is another great one. Really pretty flowers, and also very pretty greenery on many of them too. So there's a bunch of different kinds out there. So we've got the tall Coreopsis that likes wetter soils, prairie Coreopsis that likes drier soils, just all different kinds. There is a Coreopsis that will fit your needs. Depending on which one you get, they can go anywhere from 2 to 5 feet tall. Full sun, they are a summer bloomer. So bright yellow flowers right there in the summer, really, really show-stopping. So I think, yeah, I think they're blooming now, actually. And Eastern prickly pear. I have to throw this one in here because people don't believe me that cactus grow here in Illinois, but yes, they do. Eastern prickly pear, you'll find growing in drier, sandy areas. I actually have some in my yard up on my dry berm, and it's fantastic. The spines that are on them are not fantastic. Weeding around them can be tricky. Get your Kevlar gloves out. They have these little, like microscopic hair spines on them that you get them in your hands and they are really obnoxious. They're not the kind that are going to like stab you to death, but these little microscopic ones is like death by 1,000 cuts. The flowers on them though, when they bloom, they are spectacular, right? They're like the size of my hand and bright yellow with that orange center, really, really phenomenal. We find them, you know, obviously the dunes areas, sandy areas, Kankakee Sands Preserve by us, I'm pretty sure has some. It's really cool. If you have a good spot in your yard for them, they're really, really cool and easy to propagate too. All you got to do is take some of these pads, lay them on the ground, and they'll just root. So easy to grow if you can get your hands on a pad or two with a friend who's got it or something. Please don't collect from the wild. But like I said, really, really easy to grow and really kind of show stopping. So when I was a kid, I got to tell this story. My dad had gotten some from a horse pasture where they lived in Manhattan. Why it was growing in this pasture, who knows, but this was like back in the 70s. And so he got a couple of those pads and brought them with us to the house that we lived in when I was a kid and sort of threw them in the back of a little flower bed that had, you know, geraniums and all the normal stuff that people put in landscaping. And he put those little pads back there and just sort of forgot about them. Well, fast forward like 10 years, and now this entire flower bed has been taken over by this Eastern prickly pear. And it's just cactus. It was protected. We had a tri-level, and so there was just a little bit of a lip over them. And so they were just a little bit protected by the house there. And my goodness, they just loved it there. In the summer when they would bloom, it was show-stopping. Just absolutely amazing the way this cactus took over in front of the house. And then, of course, my dad got to say that he had planted cactus underneath his teenage daughter's bedroom window. So there was that. All right, and don't forget your grasses. A lot of people focus on flowers when you're thinking about planting beds, but grasses are really going to do the heavy lifting of taking up space, providing some structure, and, you know, even some color interest if you go into things like little blue stem. So as I mentioned, drop seed is really, it's one of my favorites because it's lower growing, but you get clumps of those. It's a clumping grass, so you get clumps of drop seed, and then you get some maybe Coreopsis or something coming up in and around it. And now you've got this bright pops of yellow color against this green background. It's really, really nice. You know, switchgrass is another one you can put in there. Just lots of different options of grasses, depending on what you're trying to do. Do you want something taller, lower growing? Lots and lots of different options with grasses. So don't forget your grasses. If you're doing just kind of a general planting, the numbers I've heard are sometimes, you know, 60-40 of grasses to flowers. So definitely make sure you don't forget your grasses. And also don't forget your shrubs too, because there's lots of great native shrubs that we can use that love sun and will take up space and are much better in the long run than boxwoods or, you know, some of the other stuff that we start to see. Service berries are great. They're really, really nice shrubs. You can see they've got pretty flowers on them. The berries are something that are loved by the birds and the other animals, and they are delicious, by the way. We can eat them too. Viburnum, very common, very easy to grow. 9-bark, I just put a couple of 9-bark in my yard and I'm loving them already. Very, very nice shrub with really nice fall color to them. Elderberry is another one, likes it a little bit wetter. That was one of the things I put up against my house in very heavy clay, and it seems to be thriving. It's taking over in just 2 years. So that elderberry is another one you'll see. A lot of people will make jam or things out of elderberries. Birds will eat them. Buttonbush can be one that's tricky to grow because it really does like it wet, but it's a gorgeous shrub. And if you have watched my previous webinars, you know I'm a sucker for weird looking flowers, and tell me those are not weird looking flowers, right? So buttonbush is another really great one if you can get it. So our Conservation at Home program I had mentioned earlier is a program where we at the Conservation Foundation will come out and consult with you, the homeowner, if you are in our service area. If you're outside of our service area, we may still have a franchisee in your area. So if you are outside of our area, let me know. But if you are inside our area and would like someone to come out and give you a free consultation on your yard, maybe you're just starting out on your native journey and you want to know more about what native plants you can put in your yard, give us a call, drop me an email. I will get you to the right person. Just let me know where you live. And we're happy to talk with you about this. Like I said, consultations are free. And if you want to join the program, once you know there's a checklist. And so, you know, once we check off enough things on the checklist, then you can get your very own sign that tells your neighbors, hey, I know what I'm doing. And that program we've got, I said almost, I think we're probably over 1,000 at this point because we are certifying more and more people every day. Since I started at the Conservation Foundation about 5 years ago, I'm seeing more and more acceptance and embracing of native plants and landscaping. So we're always glad to see that. So like I said, drop us a note. And if you're interested in getting involved with the Conservation Foundation, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can become a member. Like I said, when you close out of this webinar, you will be on our website magically with lots of information on there, including a button to become a member. You can also visit our McDonald farm in Naperville or our Dixon Merced farm in Montgomery. We've got lots of different things going on. We've got our farm stand is open on, I think today, I think it's Wednesdays. Our farm stands is open. You can follow us on social media. That's where you'll find out more information about webinars and all the other cool things that we're doing. And you can get your yard certified. So with that, I will take some questions now. There's my contact information. Just a note, that is my desk line. I'm mostly working from home, but if you leave me a message there, I will get it. So, all right, let's take a look for some questions here. So first of all, Tanya wants to know, are there good, accurate resource to find out what's native to your area? My best recommendation for that is find your local native plant society. I know here in Illinois, we have a great Illinois Native Plant Society, and they've got great information. They've got a Facebook page, they've got a website, they do meetings, all of that kind of stuff. You can also contact, if you've got an extension office nearby, So like Illinois Extension, Ag Extension, those kinds of things. Really, if none of those are working, just Google your state name and native plants. And chances are there is going to be something there. You'll be able to find something. Danelle wants to know, is it too late in the season to plant these? No, it is not. That's the interesting thing about native plants. So a lot of times you'll see native plant sales and things in the spring, and spring is a great time to plant native plants. Don't get me wrong. But it's not the only time. So you just need to know, like, if you're going to plant them now, you may need to water them a little bit more than you would have in the spring, but it's always a good idea to water new plants when you plant them, right? So many natives, like especially shrubs and things, it's better to plant them in the fall. And there are some natives that if you're going to go by seed, actually need to go through a winter freeze thaw cycle before they'll even sprout. So milkweeds are notorious. They're notoriously hard to start from seed just because they need to be stratified. And that's the term for going through that freeze thaw cycle. So you can sort of simulate it in the refrigerator. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times with milkweed seed, one of the ways they say to plant them is to sprinkle them on the snow and then just sort of like tap them in with your foot. So you actually winter sow a lot of those plants. So yeah, it's not too late at all. Tanya says, my experience with Coreopsis is they spread a lot. Is that common? Probably depends on the type of Coreopsis. The kind I have, and I got to be honest, I can't even tell you what kind I have right now. They're not too bad with spreading. Sometimes, like I said, if things are really happy, they'll spread a lot. Another example of that is Virginia waterleaf. I've had people tell me, oh, that's so aggressive, it gets everywhere. I have a little patch in my yard and it's been a little patch forever and it's never gone anywhere. So is it out of the question that Coreopsis could spread a lot? Absolutely not. But it probably just all depends on the type that you have. Let's see. Cindy says, I've been timing sun, but would you say that should be done throughout the growing season for a consensus or just dependent on seasonality of the plants? I think with many plants, while it is a consideration, it's not the only consideration. So if you have a general sense of how much sun it gets, that's probably good. You know, sites are generally not going to be like all sun and then all shade, unless you're talking about like a forest, a hardwood forest where the leaves are all down and now there's sunlight getting to the forest floor. But there's a whole specific type of plant called spring ephemerals that take advantage of that. But again, as long as you get a general sense of this site gets about half sun, half shade, that's usually good enough. Like, we don't have to get too obsessive over that. Let's see. Do you know of any consultation services similar to those you discussed in Ontario? Oh boy. Canada, I love you, but I don't know of sources like that specifically in Canada. My advice would be to, again, look for a local Wild Ones chapter. I don't know if you have those in Canada as well. Wild Ones is a great group to check with. And as I said, you can go to findalandtrust.org. That's a website for LTA, the Land Trust Association. And you can, find out if you have a land trust nearby. That might also be an option. Land trusts are usually pretty knowledgeable about growing native plants in your area. So that would be my recommendation for you. All right, so I'm going to stop my share. There we go. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up here. And let's see, any others? I want to make a milkweed garden next year. Can I collect seeds this fall and broadcast them in the area, or do I have to plant live? Nope, that's a great idea. If you get your seeds, Like I said, winter sowing is good for milkweeds, unless you're going to try and stratify them in the refrigerator, which there's all kinds of instructions online that you can find for that. Best of luck to you. Like I said, they're notoriously hard to start from seed, but definitely read up on it, and that should give you a better idea of how you want to do it. If you want to try and just winter sow and, you know, go out in the middle of December and drop them into the ground and hope they don't get eaten by chipmunks and all of that. Or if you want to, you know, start them indoors and do it that way. Both different ways that you can do it. But best of luck to you with that. All right. So I want to thank you all for attending today. We really do appreciate it. We hope to see you back next week when we're going to be talking about beekeeping. And after that, about green architecture sorts of things. I'm kind of excited about that one. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Enjoy your day. And we will see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.